Here are your Week 9 fantasy starts and sits from the Football Therapist. So, a bit of transparency on Week 8. Kind of an off week, especially with quarterbacks. A lot of quarterbacks struggled in fantasy football this week. We got only 11 out of 28 starts and sits right for 39%. Running backs, we got 34 out of a designated 52 starts and sits for 65%. Wide receivers, 40 out of 68 for 59%. And then tight ends, we had 35 designated starts and sits. We got 20 right for 57%. Across the board, a lot of the numbers were down this week, especially with quarterbacks. Not many quarterbacks meeting that 18-point threshold. So it's definitely a difficult week, hoping to improve this week. Some of our big hits: Herbert, Burrow, Gio Bernard, Jamal Williams, Jerick McKinnon, Brandon Ayuk, Kendrick Bourne, Corey Davis, Travis Fulgham, and Hayden Hurst. Some of our bigger misses: Teddy Bridgewater, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Darrell Henderson, Cole Beasley, Deontay Johnson. We said that Williams was a sit. That was Mike Williams, and he had a big day. And then Robert Tonyan we had as a sit, but he had a big day. Here are some quarterbacks to start for this week. I'm going to start Drew Lock. He threw 3 touchdowns this week. They're playing Atlanta, who gives up 26.4 points per game to QBs. So I think that he should have a really good game this week. I'm going to start Teddy Bridgewater. I think Carolina's going to have to throw a lot in this game to keep pace. He had an off week last week. They should get CMC back, which will free him up. So I think that he could have a decent game this week. I'm going to start Derek Carr. The Chargers, they give up 23.2 points per game to quarterbacks. They got beat against Drew Lock last week. Carr, he had to deal with the weather, but he should have a good week this week. Cam Newton should have a big week. He gets the Jets. They give up 21.4 points per game to quarterbacks. I think he'll run a ton and have a quality game. And then Big Ben is a must start. Dallas, they give up 19.6 points per game to quarterbacks. They looked good against Philly, that defense of Dallas, but I think Pittsburgh is going to shred them this week, and I think Big Ben has a big game. Here are some quarterbacks to sit. I'm sitting Tannehill. It's a tough matchup. Chicago, they give up only 15.5 points per game to QBs. I think it'll be low scoring, so I'm going to fade Tannehill this week. I'm also going to sit Stafford. There's a chance he may not even play. He's been put on the COVID list, but we'll see. But without Golladay, it's a tough start. He put up only 16 points per game without him. I really don't like him in this matchup if Galladay's not in. And again, he may not even play. He could play, but for now I'm going to sit him. Tua is a sit for me. He's going against a solid Arizona defense. He wasn't asked to do much last week, and their running back is out, Myles Gaskin, so it could be a tough matchup for him with that. So I'm going to sit Tua. Daniel Jones, he had flashes of really good play last week. It's a tough matchup against Washington coming off the bye. I will sit him this week. Then I'm sitting Phillip Rivers. He's been on fire recently, but they're going against Baltimore. Tough defense. They force a lot of turnovers. And even though they could be missing some guys, I still don't trust Rivers in this spot. So I will. Here are some running backs to start. Philip Lindsay, I really like this week. He was very efficient. He had a 55-yard touchdown run last week. I expect him to have a good game against Atlanta. Zach Moss, he outperformed Singletary last week. The touches were similar, but he had 20 fantasy points. I think that he could continue to get a lot of reps, and I will start him this week against Seattle. J.K. Dobbins, it's a tough draw. Indy, they give up only 14.3 points per game to running backs. Yet, I love the efficiency he had last week against the top defense. He saw 72% of the snap share, and he had 121 total yards. I'm expecting a big week for him, so I'll start him. Swift is another guy I'll start. He struggled last week. He saw 25 routes, though, and had 4 targets. With Galladay out, I think he could get a lot of work in the passing game and see his volume increase, so I'll start him. Damian Harris is another start. Was efficient last week. He had 102 total yards. The Jets, they give up 20 points per game to running backs, so I think he could have a solid day. So I'll start Damian Harris. And then Edmonds, he's a must start in all your leagues. He's going to get a lot of touches, get a lot of targets in this lead role. He could be top 5 to 10. And the Dolphins team giving up 21 points per game to running backs, so definitely start him this week. Here are some running backs to sit. I'm going to be sitting McKinnon. He saw only 7 touches last week. That's not good volume. Coming off a short week, I worry about the usage for him, so I'll be sitting him this week. Denver, they've been really good against the run. They give up only 14.8 points per game to running backs. And Gurley, he's kind of not been as efficient as of late. I expect him to pass a bit more in this game, so I will not be starting Gurley. Singletary, he was outperformed by Moss last week. I just talked about it. I would sit him this week due to all those reasons I talked about with Moss. Jonathan Taylor, he was banged up last week apparently, so only 13 touches, was outperformed by Wilkins. Baltimore, they give up only 13.4 points per game to running backs, so it's a tough matchup, so I will sit him. Ronald Jones, he's been outtouched by Fournette 35 to 25 over the past 2 weeks. He's been losing volume. He struggles to hold on to the ball. I will sit him this week. And lastly, I'm going to sit Zeke. I know he's a stud, but I can't trust him. Teams are stacking the box. 8-man fronts. He's struggling to find any room. Pittsburgh, they give up only 15.3 points per game to running backs. So I think he busts again this week. So I will be sitting Zeke this week. Here are some wide receivers to start this week. Cole Beasley had a down week last week, but against Seattle, who's the worst defense against wide receivers in fantasy, I think he'll have a huge week this week, so definitely start him. Anthony Miller, he had 11 targets last week. Tennessee, they give up 29.1 points per game to wide receivers. I think they use him a lot more moving forward, so start him this week. Marvin Jones, he could be a top 20 wide receiver. This week. He's been a top 20 wide receiver over the past 2 weeks. With Galladay out, the targets should be there. Minnesota, they do give up 32.4 points per game. Now, again, Stafford may or may not play. That could definitely impact starting him. If Stafford plays, start him. If Stafford doesn't play, you'll probably have to sit him. Chase Claypool, he had a bounce back week. He had 9 targets. He gets a Dallas team that struggles against the pass, so I would play him. Sterling Shepard, he's been on a roll. He had 18 targets in the past 2 weeks. He's been a top 15 wide receiver over that span. Expect him to be a solid wide receiver too this week due to volume. And also, Jerry Jeudy is a big start. He saw 10 targets last week. He gets an Atlanta team that is below average in pass coverage. I like him a lot this week. Here are some wide receivers to sit, kind of some big names here. Hollywood, he's been struggling. He saw only 2 targets last week. Indy, they're consistent against the pass. They don't give up many points to wide receivers. I don't trust the matchup or the volume, so I'll sit him this week. DJ Chark, he gets a new quarterback in Jake Luton. He finally started to see some targets before the bye, but I can't really roll him out with a new quarterback. He's kind of boom or bust, so I would sit him this week. So Devontae Parker, he saw only 2 targets last week with Tua. He draws Patrick Peterson, who could be a tough matchup, so I'll sit him this week. Christian Kirk, he's been solid, but Miami's pass defense kind of has been much improved over the past few weeks. It could be a difficult matchup for him, and I don't maybe see the volume that we've seen, so I'll sit Christian Kirk. And then Amari Cooper, I would sit him this week. I can't really trust him after last week. Only 1.5 fantasy points. They could be on their 4th or 5th string quarterback, so just don't start him this week. Here are some tight ends to start. Noah Fant, big week last week, had 9 targets. He looked to return to his form. He gets Atlanta, who gives up the most tight ends to points to tight end, so he is definitely a start this week. Evan Ingram, he's 3rd in targets this year at 54. The volume is there. Of course, it is the Giants, so anything can happen. But with the volume, I feel kind of confident starting him this week. So put him in your lineups. Here's another one. Darren Fells. Jacksonville, they give up 12.3 points per game to tight ends. Again, Jordan Akins may play. He may not play. I may be confident in starting him, especially if Akins is out. Monitor those injury reports, as he can have a big week, in my opinion. Also, Gronk, he's been on a roll. He's the tight end 2 over the past 4 weeks. Big matchup with New Orleans. I think he can get a touchdown on Brady. Will lean on him. And lastly, TJ Hockenson, big week for him. Assuming that Stafford plays. Again, all of this is assuming Stafford plays. He saw 10 targets last week. Should benefit from Galladay being out. Again, check those injury reports and those COVID lists. Here are some tight ends to sit. Schultz gets a tough matchup. Pittsburgh, they only give up 4.9 points per game to tight ends. Don't trust the quarterback, so I'll sit him this week. Jonnu Smith, he's kind of disappeared. He's only had 8 targets in the last 3 games, limited catches, tough matchup, so sit him this week. Trey Burton is also a sit. He saw his targets dip a bit as Doyle and Mo Alley Cox return to action. The volume will be spread out. Tough defense in Baltimore, so I would sit him this week. Logan Thomas, he's a sit for me. The Giants surprisingly give up only 5.1 points per game to tight ends. They are kind of solid in that area, so I will sit Thomas this week. And lastly, Mike Gesicki, he's a sit. He's kind of disappeared with Tua starting. He only saw 2 targets last week, so don't trust him this week. Here are some defenses to think about starting. I really like Houston this week going against Lutton, inexperienced rookie, so I would trust them in this matchup. Arizona, they get Miami, who just lost Myles Gaskin. He was big for their offense. Tua, this could be a difficult matchup. I could see some turnovers, so I'd start Arizona this week. Tennessee, I'd start. Chicago, they have the lowest scoring points per game in terms of overall scoring, so I expect a low-scoring game. So I would start Tennessee this week. Perhaps they get a turnover or 2. And then Washington coming off the bye with that front. I think they get a lot of pressure, force some turnovers, so I'd start them against the Giants. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe, leave a like, and I'll see you guys soon.